Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our fourth day of this challenge of where we are learning here how we can use effective communication to fight bias at work. And today, the topic, the bias we will discuss, is the attribution bias. So, to refresh your memory, we have talked already about unconscious bias, performance bias, and today we are talking about attribution bias. The next ones to talk about will be likability, maternal bias, and affinity bias. And before starting today, I have some questions for you. Let's play around here and see how much aware you are about biases in your work environment. Here we go. The first question. So, when a woman's name was replaced with a man's name on a resume, how much more likely were evaluators to say they would hire the applicant? When a woman's name was replaced with a man's name in a resume, how much more likely the evaluators, thinking that this applicant was a man, they would hire him? What do you think? These are important facts that are shocking. And here is the answer. Over 60% more likely. So in other words, when in a resume there's a man's name, there are 60% of chances more that that applicant could be hired when comparing with another woman with the same qualifications. We are not compared with different, not apples and pears, same qualifications. Second question. When hiring managers believed a woman had children because parent-teacher association coordinator or something alike appeared on her resume, how much less likely was her to be hired? So for you mothers out there who have a family, who talk openly about it, I'm not saying that you shouldn't, but let's be honest here and let's be realistic. In a situation like that, when you mention that you have you're part of some parent association, or if you have a family, what is the percentage, the possibility, less likely that you will be hired? It's important to know. Shocking. 79 less likely to be hired. It's not only shocking, but this is infuriating. And I believe all women, by all means, have the right to be infuriated, because this is something. 79 less percent because you have a family. And if women don't have a family, there won't be people on the planet. Think about it. Basic stuff. However, and also at the top of it, if that woman is hired, she would be offered less money. Here, this reference here comes from an American perspective. I don't know what exactly will be the number in Europe, but anyways, we take the percentage. So women out there, HR out there, people who are in the position to decide if a woman, a mother, should or should not participate and come to join your company, your team, stick to the facts. Look her capabilities. Look at her results. It should be irrelevant if she's a mother or not. That is her responsibility and her decision. If being a mother starts affecting her work after she is hired, then it's a different story. But if she has proven records that she is excellent on what she does, because I believe a responsible professional, woman, mother or not, will not put herself in a position where she cannot undertake the responsibility. And we know, we talked before yesterday or the day before, that women tend to wait until she has all the requirements to apply for a task, for a job. So therefore, they will be even more qualified. So this is ultimately unacceptable. Last for today, as a quiz. How much more likely are men to ask for a raise than a woman? And that was really, the result is that answer is very interesting. So do you know how much more likely are men to ask for a raise than women? So the answer is women and men are in the fair race there for their raise of salary of a promotion. However, from my own experience, from what I know, from what I research in this topic of women in leadership, I would say that women would not negotiate for such a high salary as men do. So I would say even if they negotiate for salary, for raises and promotions as often as men, I am positive, I don't have the numbers and the facts here with me, but I'm positive that in most of the cases, they would negotiate for less money, if they negotiate at all. Because this is another thing. Most women don't negotiate their paycheck. They take whatever they are offered. So let's continue today with our attribution bias. And I want to let's watch a video from one of the experts in LeanIn, because we are basing this conversation in the research from LeanIn and McKinsey and Company. And let's see what they have to say about attribution bias. And on my side here, I give you a introduction. So you know that attribution bias is closely linked to performance bias. So you see in some examples that I will give later, that some of them are used, one of them are used for the performance bias, because they're very, very close. Because we see women as less competent than men, we tend to give them less credit for accomplishment and blame them more for mistakes. And one thing I want to say here, when we say we see women less competent than men, women, this is not only men seeing women less competent than men. It's like women also seeing other women less competent than men. Okay, so be attentive to that. Even when women and men work on tasks together, women often get less credit for success and more blame for failure. How convenient this is. We also fall into the trap of thinking women's contributions are less valuable. This often plays in our meetings, where women are more likely to be talked over and interrupted. And we saw this before, that women are three times more interrupted than men, even by other women. Other women interrupt less men than other women. Ladies, we have lots of things to learn here, and we have to be attentive that we are also contributing to those biases to happen. So let's go to our video, and I hope everything works fine, because I am having a nightmare with my connections here. So I ask for apologies on that, and let's see how it goes.
Two quick reminders before I get started. First, people of all genders fall into bias traps, not just men. Second, knowing that unconscious bias exists isn't enough. We need to look for it and commit to take steps to counteract it. Attribution bias is closely linked to performance bias. Because we tend to think women are less competent, we are less likely to give them credit for their accomplishments, and we are more likely to blame them for mistakes. Even when women and men work on tasks together, women often get less credit for success and more blame for failure. We also fall into the trap of thinking women's contributions are less valuable than men's. One place this happens is when women are talking. Women are more likely to be talked over and interrupted in meetings. In one study, men interrupted women nearly 3 times as often as they interrupted other men. And women were also far more likely to interrupt other women, but they rarely interrupted men. Perhaps not surprisingly, because women are held to higher standards, tend to receive less credit, and wield less influence, their confidence often erodes. For example, when it comes to performance, women predict they'll do worse than they actually do. In contrast, men predict they'll do better than they actually do. Women are also less likely to think they're ready for a promotion than men. And men typically apply for jobs when they meet 60% of hiring criteria, while women wait until they meet 100%. However, it may not just be lack of confidence holding women back. Because we hold women to higher standards than men, women may rightfully feel like they have to hit a higher bar. Now you know how attribution bias works. As a next step, you can use our bias cards to learn specific ways it shows up in the workplace and what to do about it.
So here we are. Now you know. And what I wanted to do now, like what I want to share with you here, is let's go into certain meetings, some real cases, and analyze why those situations matter, why you should pay attention to those situations, what you can do about it, and why they happen in the first place, so then you can prevent them to happen. So the first one is with regards to meeting dynamics. Let's go back. I'm having problems. Okay. Meeting dynamics. So you're in a meeting and a woman colleague is spoken over and interrupted. Why it matters? Why? Well, if women's ideas aren't heard, it can make it harder for them to be perceived as key contributors, which can harm their career progression. When teams miss out on women's insight, it can also mean your company is missing out. Your company is missing out because you're not bringing diversity to the table. You're not bringing different perspectives. Because women and men, we do see the world in a different manners. We experience the world in a different manners. Even if you are working the same environment under the same role title, we have different experiences. So we need to bring those different voices to every table where decision making is taking place. And teams that foster diverse points of view have better ideas and get more done. So what to do when you see this happening? When a woman gets interrupted, speak up. Whether if you're a man or another woman, speak up. You might say something like that. I'd like to hear the rest of what Claudia thought. Or, Claudia raised an important point. I'd like to consider further before we move on. Don't ignore it. And don't even, as I know other women being solidary to Claudia, would say it would be their upset without saying anything. And for you guys out there, if you are a man who welcome diversity, who would like to work with in a more fair environment, you also can step up and raise your voice and give the space to that person, call the attention to that person, to that woman who has been spoke over in that meeting, the meeting that you're participating. And if you are leading a meeting, reduce interruptions by following an agenda and asking people to contribute in a structured way. I cannot tell you how many times I talk to people, to leaders in their companies, and I ask if, when they complain about this, for example, I ask, what was the agenda? Did you have an agenda? In how many meetings people go without having a clear agenda, without knowing what's going to happen and what are the outcomes expected for that meeting. And at the top of that, not only organizing agenda, you need to define as a meeting leader how you will lead that meeting. For example, you can tell at the beginning, before starting your presentation, that the meeting will be run in this way. You will present, and then after, you open the floor for questions and answers. Or you can say, I will be presenting, feel free to interrupt me, but raise your hand, and then I will resume what I'm talking, and then I will give you the opportunity to ask your questions. Please make sure your questions are relevant to everybody here and be concise and to the point. Other things that you can say is, if the other people are also giving an input in the meeting, presenting something, you inform everybody else saying, this meeting will be led by me, but Peter, John, Mary, and Claudia will be presenting their bit, and they will be presented in this order. And you are allowed to stop them, raise your hand, stop them, and ask a question, or please wait for them to finish their presentation. And then Mary, who is sitting here beside me, will be curating your questions. So there are several ways you can have that structure, especially also, not only especially, also in a virtual environment where you can have someone curating. You can ask the people to write their questions in their chat or use their digital hand, and then you have someone, Mary, curating who raised their hand first, or what are the questions in the chat, and then you just define and you tell everybody beforehand when you'll be dealing with those. So this will avoid all this clashing of conversation, of trying to express their ideas or asking questions, and will give a more structured, balanced, and fair meeting environment for everybody involved. Why it happens, why situations like that happened in the first place without agenda, not even considering the agenda or the structuring the meeting, is because people tend to value women's contribution less than men's. Simple. So then some people overhear what women says. And one way this play out is in meetings where women, and particularly women of color, are interrupted more and get less time to speak than men do. So this is why, for you meeting leader out there, when preparing for your meeting, it's not only the content that is important to be prepared, rehearsed, and etc. Is to have a clear agenda, knowing where you want to go, with what's the outcome of this meeting, but also how the meeting will be run. Now, it's about reviews. And when a committee, you are on a review committee, and several members argue against a woman's promotion because she's not seen as leader, even though her team delivers outstanding results. I used this example yesterday for the performance bias because also they are very close. And why it matters. The review committee may be making incorrect and unfair assumptions about the woman's abilities. Additionally, if the review committee uses a narrow definition of leadership, they may unfairly exclude a lot of people, like this woman. And besides, again, same point, facts. You have to bring facts. Assumptions, they don't lead to anything. And I mentioned yesterday, and I mentioned here today, assumptions are the mothers of all facts. Facts. Get facts. What to do? Point out that the women's team delivers superb results. This is a fact. And suggest that their performance speaks to their leadership. Fact. You can also ask them, the ones who see this woman as not fit for the job, not as a good leader, to explain the attributes she lacks. Fact. When people are asked to justify their thinking, it can help reduce bias in decision making. As a long-term solution, suggest creating detailed metrics for performances reviews, also for hiring, including clear expectations for leaders. This way, all employees will be evaluated based on a more complete definition of good leadership and using the same standards, which reduces bias in the review process. You see here, there's one thing that I want to make a comment here is about people be evaluated based on a more complete definition of good leadership. Good leadership might differ from company to company, from team to team. So this is why these information and the transparency of giving this to your employees, to everybody from the beginning, once they join your company, once they join your team, so everybody is clear. You have to set expectations for everybody, not only for yourself as a leader of what you're expecting from your team, but from your team to know what you are expecting from them and what they can expect from you in your leadership. Why it happens? Both women and men are more readily associated. I rephrase. Both women and men are more readily associate men with again. Both women and men more readily associate men with leadership. This bias is so strong that when women work on teams, their contributions are often attributed to the team as a whole. In contrast, when men work on teams, they are more likely to be seen as taking a leadership role. The bias affects different groups of women in different ways. Asian women, for example, are often seen as not assertive enough to be leaders, while Black women and Latinas can be stereotyped as not talented enough for leadership roles or too emotional. And Native American women contend with both of these stereotypes. So be aware of those. Always, when you have a doubt, when you have this feelings are good. It's important. We all have them, but we need to have facts when you want to build a fair environment for working and for collaboration and for good leadership. Reviews and promotion again, another case situation. In a meeting reviewing annual performance, a coworker asks how a woman could have possibly brought so much new business to the company, but doesn't show the same skepticism about men. Why it matters? Underestimating and over scrutinizing women can diminish their standing at work and lead them to being overlooked for promotions and choice assignments. If it happens often, it may point to bias problems at your company. And not only also that, will put the professional woman in a very difficult situation of having to prove herself over and over. And if this is too much, get to the point she starts doubting herself. And this is where, when I say we have to have our not only our standards but our boundaries, and we have to be sure for what we stand for and know when this is too much, because even if we are here learning about biases and how we can fight them to build a better work environment, there are certain environments that are not worth fighting. So it's important to know that. And for other women out there also, that I know that sometimes they fight for too long. And this is when I say fighting for environments, for positions in environments that are not worth the fight, and or fighting not enough because they fall into believing those biases everybody around her are telling her about her capabilities, and then they end up giving up. So what to do? Ask your colleague if they have a reason to question this woman's performance. Bring the facts. You can say, she is clearly getting great results. Why are you doubting her? Bring me the facts. If their answer suggests that they are discounting the woman's performances unfairly, you can explain that women's accomplishments tend to be questioned more than men's. I would go further with this, because it's not only explaining. So if you are on a professional in the same level, this is disrespectful. Bring me the facts. And if you believe this woman is you doubt how she's bringing this best performance or more clients to your company, so you have to come up with a very good reason to justify your questioning about that. Why it happens? People often question the basis for women's achievements. Even women, they assume that women did well through luck or outside help, rather than with their own skills. In talking about luck here, let's give me a parenthesis, an example for you to have in mind, that every time someone thinks that you achieved something because of luck, there are two things here I want you to remember. The first thing is Picasso's quote, "Luck always found me working." In fact, he said, luck and creativity also always found me working. So there's no such thing as luck. There is work that when you do your best with the resources you have, you achieve amazing results. And when someone says to you that you are lucky to have had that promotion or that raise of payment, you said, do you know why? Do you know what? I am definitely lucky, because luck always found me working. And the other one is also for women, when people question your achievements, or even when people praise your achievements, that you diminish your achievements yourself. When you say something like, oh, that's nothing. Someone praise you for something you have done, well done, and you say, oh, no, that's nothing. No, that's not important. Yes, it is important. And you attribute, you have, and that's what I'm going to say here after. As a result of all these behaviors, women are often asked to prove themselves repeatedly, while men are not, and because they also diminish themselves. And when they are praised, they say that's nothing. And I'm telling you something here. When you say to someone praises you and you say it's nothing, you're also invalidating the other person's perception of yourself. You're invalidating the person's comment. And if you every time someone praises you, you say it's nothing, you end up invalidating everybody's perception of what you do. Then they will start taking you for granted as well, because you are taking yourself for granted. So when you don't have anything to say, lady, just say thank you. Don't say anything else. Just say, breathe in. If that's difficult for you, just breathe in and say thank you. And it's the same like outside the work environment. When you ladies out there, we know that very well. When someone gives you a compliment by something you have done or something you're wearing, for example, what is the most common answer in that situation? Oh, yeah, that's nothing. This is old. Oh, I have this for a long time. Oh, I bought this on sales. What the hell is this? So if someone pays you a compliment for what you're wearing, doesn't matter if it's a vintage, it's from the last century, if you bought on sales, if a friend of you gave to you, don't say anything. Just say, thank you. I'm happy that you liked it. I liked it too. So to conclude for today, that you remember that bias is not limited to gender. So it's very important that you remember that because we are talking here about how to fight bias at work using communication, and we are focusing on women's bias at work, but this is not only for women, and we can all, men, colleagues there, you can also learn from this. That also knowing that bias exists isn't enough. You need to take action. So there's no lucky way to get away of bias. You have to do the work. And that unfortunately, we all fall into bias traps. And awareness is what we need to not, well, if we fall into the situation and if we see that is happening around us, we know why it's important to acknowledge it, not ignore it, and you know why it happens and what to do. And in the future, I will tell you how to do it. So that's all for today. I hope you have enjoyed it. This was our fourth day for this 30 days challenge. Is a really challenge for me. If you see, sometimes I even get so overwhelmed that I lose my words, but it doesn't matter. What is important is that the message, I believe, is getting through. And I hope to see you tomorrow, where I will talk about the likability bias. And that is a tricky one because, we like to be surrounded by the people that we like, that we feel that there's something alike, like us. Okay, so see you tomorrow and bye for now.